Good afternoon and welcome to the next episode of the Reinventing Civil Society. My guest today is Hayk Abrahamyan, a strategic communication and campaign specialist from Armenia, and a very good friend. We have been cooperating for quite some time and already having a lot of discussions. So, Hayk, welcome to the program.
Hi, Lucas.
Hayk has supported the civil society organization, activist groups, and youth initiatives in designing advocacy campaign, community mobilization strategies, and leadership development program. And in the last couple of years, he has worked a lot on adapting organizing-based approach to the Armenia context. And this is the main thing what we will discuss today. So, Hayk, let me ask the first question. You and I have, I think independently, one from another, discovered Marshall Ganz community organizing framework. And probably we have discovered it in a moment when both of us started to feel that this professionalized NGO system, which is heavily dependent on the foreign donors, which is quite typical for our region, is stopped to be sufficient. Let's say that we are really in a very different social, economic, political, and geopolitical conditions, and that we need something new, that we need kind of not abandoning what we have, but also insert something new. So let me start by asking what you feel is started to be insufficient in a traditional approach of the civil society.
Yeah, I think it would be good if I just go back to the time when I learned about Ganz methodology of community organizing and how it later became something that I realized is really needed in Armenian context. The first time I heard about this methodology was in 2018, after the revolution happened in Armenia. We invited a group of activist organizers who already knew about this methodology to do some training workshop for Armenian organizations. And at that time, we were kind of very hopeful and confident about the democratic perspective of Armenia. And we were a bit dismissive maybe to what people were teaching us from other contexts. But what I remember from that workshop is that this keyword power was popping up a lot. And it's really interesting because in Armenian, we use the word power only in relation to political and partisan power. So when we say power, we mean people in power in politics. We don't talk about power in the context of civil society. We don't even have a word that kind of clearly explains that. So I kind of dismissed that, but it was interesting to hear about that perspective. And only after several months later, there was an incident when a group of urban activists who were protesting a development project in Yerevan, they were meeting with a high-level official in the government and saying that this is not, okay to do, and you're not listening to the activists, you're not listening to our complaints. Basically, this high-level official asked them, okay, we are going to go ahead with the development project. If you're against, how many people can you mobilize and take out to the streets? And people were shocked. The civil society partners were shocked because, they were expecting some level of partnership between the government and civil society that we can discuss it properly and not something like, if you do protest, just go out and organize people and do some protests. If you do that successfully, we'll listen to you. And people were frustrated, but I was like, okay, so this is a new reality for us. The rules of the game have changed. It's not, the authoritarian government that you had very clear enemy and the public is dissatisfied. So you had your legitimacy. You can, speak about the problems and people will say, yeah, we support you, etc. Now you have to kind of earn it. You have to earn your place at the table. You have to earn your right to be listened to by the government. And it was not something that I think the partners were used to. And this is when this idea of power clicked, because I started thinking, how do the NGOs actually can influence change in this new context? And what are the challenges that we right now face? And this is where the idea of how the professionalized NGOs are lacking certain things that kind of prevent them from influencing change. This is where my reflection started around power and what they're lacking. And I found like several things that I can share, maybe very briefly. So before the kind of, if you're a professional NGO, which kind of the more established organizations in Armenia are, your source of power is your expertise. You have certain knowledge in the certain topic, but you are not political. So you work kind of within the system. You try to make things better. And if you fail, it doesn't really affect you. So your role is to bring some kind of contribution, say this is what needs to be done, but if it's not done, it doesn't affect you because you have your job, you have your funding, you continue working. And in terms of the people who are actually affected, your relationship with these people is very kind of transactional because you have not earned the right to represent them. You got this right from the donor because the donor gave you funding and say you can become the spokespeople of people with disabilities or, I don't know, environmental organization. You never earned from these actual people the right to represent them, right? So what you do is you treat them as kind of source of information. You give us the information, what is the problem. We then formulate some, I don't know, proposals, some policy reforms, etc. And then we advocate, and your participation remains very like formalistic. You don't influence anything in the decisions. You only give us information. So in that sense, these organizations are not accountable to the people, actually, that they're supposed to represent. They are more accountable to donors because the donors are the ones who are giving funding and kind of giving you the legitimacy to talk about this issue. And because you have the resources, you have the knowledge, you have the access, in the eyes of these people, you kind of become the problem solver, and the people actually do not have any power to do anything, just to trust you that you will do something. And it creates this dependency on organizations. And what happens if people are dependent, then kind of they are not shaping the agenda. The agenda is shaped by the organizations and donors. And because you are kind of disconnected with people, sometimes your agenda is not relevant to the actual kind of problems and grievances that people have on the ground. And this is where we see a lot of organizations are kind of doing more project by project approach. They find a single issue, they work on this issue, and then they don't have the pressure to actually solve this issue. And even with the professional organizations, we see a lot of groups that have very specific focus, like a single issue that they work on, and they disregard anything else that their community might be raising or might be kind of complaining about. And because of the donor dependency, these organizations are also and this project by project approach, they are very reactive. They cannot plan like long term. They cannot think long term, and they cannot have, they are forced to give like very immediate results, very short term kind of impact. As a result, it kind of becomes very reactive because this is only where you can identify, so this is the problem we face, this is something emerged, this is how we are going to react. But because you don't have the long-term planning, you are not thinking about how in a long run we can prevent this problem happening or achieve maybe some systemic change. So you become very reactive and fragmented in your work, and again, very dependent on the donors. So all of this is, I think, is coming from the inability of these organizations to think about power, because their power is not coming, from the people. Their legitimacy is not coming from the people. So they are forced into this cycle of projects. They are forced into this cycle of grant writing, and they become more and more professional, and they become more and more detached from actual society.
Before we continue, let's just very briefly tell who Marshall Ganz is. Let's say probably a lot of people in our region maybe have never even heard the name. So just briefly to introduce him.
Yeah, so he is actually a very influential community organizer who started his work in the civil rights movement in the US. Later, he, I think, got more popular with the kind of farm workers movement. Maybe people will know about Cesar Chavez, who is a very like prominent community organizer and campaigner in labor rights and farmers' rights. So he used to work I think it was in California, and organizing the farmers to protect their kind of labor rights, and had very successful campaigns in that sense. But more recently, I think maybe people might know about him because he was involved in Obama presidential campaign. And
The first one, isn't it?
Yes, the first campaign where he was more involved in organizing the volunteers. And the Obama campaign was very unique in a sense that it relied heavily on the volunteers. They had, I've heard like various numbers, but around like 2 million people kind of in one way or another engaged in volunteer structure. So basically the whole structuring and strategy for volunteer engagement was developed by Marshall Ganz, and this is where his methodology kind of was applied. And right now he is teaching at Harvard, and he's continuously developing this methodology based on his kind of experiences. And there is also an organization that he supported or co-founded, which is called Leadership Change Network, which is basically trying to promote this methodology across the world and train activists and organizers across the world. And I think what's interesting about Marshall, and he has like a couple of books written, so people, I think maybe we can share some titles also in the video so people can check out. It's really like based on reflection on his own experiences. It's not like purely theoretical. It's very real. It's very grounded. And even though it's like based on the American context, I think a lot of the practices that the frameworks and methods that he developed are very applicable to different contexts. And maybe we can, in our conversation, talk a bit more about the different, frameworks.
And yeah, I will put the links on some of his books, and there are also some other books written by the people who have been involved with him in a Obama campaign and have summarized this experience, and they are really very useful. I have also found them very useful. So let's now go a little bit into the key concepts of the Marshall Ganz, and probably we need to start with the concept of the organizing. So what the organizing really is, and how organizing is different than what we usually use in a civil society approach in our countries.
Yeah. So in Ganz's framework, there are like if you talk about the community organizer, there are 3 questions that the community organizer asks themselves. And the first question is, who are my people? So this is I think the most mind-blowing thing for me that when I started like learning about this, because we used to think about social change when we start thinking about, we start from issues, not people. So this is suggesting to look kind of inwards, who are you and who are your people? Because in his experience when he was working with the farmers, he's also kind of noting that one of the reasons they were successful, they had very strong motivation to succeed because this is the issues were affecting them. They had no other choice. They could never give up because this is affecting their material kind of reality. So when you start by asking who are my people, you kind of are looking inward. You are kind of opening up the space to like multitude of issues that can emerge. But also, you look at the people both as kind of the source that gives you the kind of the legitimacy why this change needs to happen, and the capacity and the resources. Because in Ganz's methodology, people are not just like beneficiaries or the target group of your project. They are the drivers of change, and you are looking at your community, at your own people, to identify the resources that you can use to kind of create the change. So the second question after who are my people, the second is what change do they want? And this is again going contrary to what we are used to in the civil society, because we assume that we are the knowledgeable, experienced, well-educated people who can analyze and identify the problems. But in this approach, you are more taking the perspective of the people who are actually living their reality, and they have a different perspective. There is this analogy that Marshall presents. He says, like, you as an organization or expert, you might be at the top of the hill, and the people are in the valley, and there is a cloud covering the valley. So from the top of the hill, you are looking at the valley and you're saying, I have some big ideas. This is what needs to change. And the people down there, I think you are not seeing everything. The cloud is not letting you still see everything. So what we need is more like, think about what the change is, what the change we want to happen. We need to work on it more collectively. And more importantly, we need to listen to people. Because what we usually do, we go and explain people what is their problem, and we expect them to understand that and agree with us. Instead, we need to listen more, because based on their experiences, there is more chance that kind of you will identify a different angle, different perspective, and their own motivation. What is it they want to change and why they want it to change? And the third question is, so how we can kind of help these people to work together so that they can turn their resources into power, the power that is needed to create the change. So this is where you are thinking about strategy, and in the Marshall Ganz approach to organizing, and in general, the organizing suggests that the strategy and the theory of change is based on how you use the resources that you have access to within your own community, and based on these resources, you create influence, you create power, and you try to achieve the change that these people want. And this is where the discussion about power becomes very important, because sometimes we think that power is somewhere out there, or only like limited number of people have access to power. We never look at us as sources of power, and we don't ask ourselves, what is it that we have that these people in power they need from us, and what is it that they have that we need from them? Because when we talk about power, it's basically the kind of negotiation of needs and resources. So we have these needs and these resources, you have these needs and these resources. How we can kind of, in our relationships, how we can kind of create a balance where we get what we want and you can get what you want. So this is also suggesting to look kind of inwards and see what is the power that people have. And the primary kind of principle is that people themselves are the source of power. The number of people that you have is the source of power. It's not necessarily the money and the funding that you get from the donor. It's not necessarily access to decision-making spaces. You have people who have kind of lived experience of the problem, and as many people you can organize and as much leadership you can develop, this is where your kind of power rests. And if we compare to other approaches that we are used to in the civil society, it's not service delivery. We're not creating good product or programs or trainings or services for our beneficiaries that they can receive. And we are not also representing them. When we talk about advocacy, usually we talk about we are talking on behalf of these people. So in the case of community organizing, you're not talking on behalf of them, you are enabling them so that they can talk themselves. And this word empowerment, which again in Armenian we don't have an equivalent, but this makes sense. Empower people, so you not give the power, but you identify, you reveal the power, you organize the power within the community so that they can stand up. And in that sense, what's interesting, there is another word in community organizing used by Marshall Ganz a lot. It's constituency. Again, I don't know if people who listen to us have the translation in their own languages. In Armenian, we definitely don't. But constituency, it comes from Latin and it means stand together. So originally, you have a community. You have a people of, I don't know, people with disabilities or people living in a certain area. This is a community based on an identity or geography or profession, whatever. what makes them from community to constituency is that when they commit to each other that we will stand up together and fight together and, I don't know, learn together, we will act together. So the role of the community organizer is basically to turn the community, which is passive and is just based on the identity. We are teachers. Okay. But we become a constituency when we stand together and we act together. So the role of the community organizer is basically to agitate, to support, to, I don't know, kind of transform the energy into more like activist energy. And the difference from another types of civil society work is another like 3 questions that Marshall asks. So we don't only ask are we successful in our campaigns? Are we successful in our advocacy? But more importantly, as a result of our work, of our advocacy, of our campaigns, did we grow? Did we manage to grow our power? Did we become more powerful? Did we become from community, transform from community to constituency? And did we develop more leaders within the community? Or is it still just us? Because sometimes you can see that like very traditional advocacy work can be successful. But the question is the people who are supposed to benefit from these changes. Is there any change in power dynamics? Are they able to continue this work? Are they able to raise new issues that they want to address? Or they are still dependent on the NGO that has all the resources and capacity within the organization? So the goal is not only to change the reality, but also to create capacity within the community to sustain this change and continue change even further, go deeper and more long term.
Do you think, is there some reasons why the organizing became particularly important for us in a current situation? Let's say, in some of the countries you are trying to defend and deepen your democracy. Somewhere your democracy is in regression and you try to protect it. Somewhere you need to achieve it. So why organizing is becoming important for us in these current circumstances?
Yeah, I can talk about the most urgent situation in Armenia. We have elections in like 10 days. And these elections are very high-stake elections about the future of democracy. It has a very like geopolitical also implications about Armenia's kind of alignment with West or Russia. So it's very important, high-stake. So you see a lot of mobilization in the civil society and the donors that we need to go out there, talk to people, explain what's at stake, and kind of show what they need to do to protect democracy. And in
how to vote. Tell them how to vote.
Basically, yeah. So what we see now is 2 different things. We have a large number of civil society organizations who were never even kind of in the regions that they are visiting. They started going to different communities, villages, towns, and started to talk to people. But it's like one-time thing. You talk, you explain, you feel like you are well received, and then you go back and I think this is good. They understood. And then you have very small number of organizations and groups who already have some presence in their communities, have very good relationships with these people, maybe around, I don't know, environmental issues or youth issues or local democracy issues. And they build on this relationship and they start talking about the upcoming election. And they already have the trust. They have very kind of strong connections. And it's easy for them to start talking about, elections, politics, because these people trust them. They know them. So what we see is, I think this is the main difference why we need community organizing, because the first model is very transactional. It's one time. You're asking people only to show up once. You're not thinking about like a long-term commitment based on certain values that you both share. You only identify maybe a common threat that you need to address, very short-term emergency. This is what you need to do. The second model is asking, like, what do we care about? What are our shared values that we already committed to? We started working, to prevent a mine to open in our community. We already care about the citizens' voice. We care about local democracy, environment. So based on our shared values, let's talk about elections. Let's talk about our commitment around elections. What is it that we need to do? It might be to vote certain way, but it might be like do an observation. Let's, talk to other people. Let's encourage people to go out and vote. So we see this difference of more like reactive short-term approach that treats people as a target audience that needs to be convinced versus the community organizing model that is already building on long-term relationships, on trust, on shared values, and is more strategic and is more natural, I believe. So I think we need both, but in a longer term, given like the challenges that countries like us in democratic transition face, we need to invest more in the community organizing approach because this builds resilience. This is not something that you wait for the crisis to happen and then go and reach out to people. You are already ready when the crisis happens because you've been already practicing this even without the kind of emergence of the crisis. And I think this is one aspect of why we need this approach. The other is that I've also noticed what we see in Armenia, in the civil society, and what the community organizing suggests how to look at leadership. Because in Armenia, we've had two different, I think, like edges, colors, of approaches to leadership. One is very hierarchical, what we see a lot in NGOs, depending on just like one or two people who have the knowledge, capacity, resources, etc. And they are the only decision maker. And they are the leader. And then on the other end of the spectrum, you have this leaderless, horizontal, not like flat, not hierarchical, mostly grassroots organizations and campaigns. And I think what is missing and what's kind of a change of perspective that needs to happen is we need more leaders, not less leaders. So because in the first case, we only have one leader. In the latter case, we have no leaders, but we need more leaders. And this is, in the community organizing, we talk about leaderful movement, like not leaderless movement. And the idea of leadership in Ganz's formulation is that leaders are the people who are kind of taking the responsibility to enable others to take action. So it shouldn't be just one person and it shouldn't be no one. There should be more people who are taking this responsibility, not to just solve the problems themselves, but to enable others, empower others so that they can act. So in this sense, like given the challenges that we face, kind of attacks on democracy and foreign interference, etc., we need more people who are able to take this responsibility and more people who are connected to their communities and they can kind of empower these communities to respond. Because again, in the context of elections, the most trusted messengers are the people who are already connected with their community. You can be a very good expert and like very known in the media. You can talk about the threats, etc. But on the ground, when people ask what is at stake at the elections, they listen to the person who they really trust, who is very local, who they know, who they've eaten with, drank with, played with. So this is again more about like long-term thinking. This is what kind of infrastructure that I think we need in countries like ours, where democracy is not very stable and it constantly under attack.
We will not be able to go into the whole methodology of the Marshall Ganz theory of the change, and we will guide people to have a look by themselves in regional resources. But are there some other concepts which have been particularly important for you when you have been, let's say, studying his approach, which you would like to share?
Yeah. So basically, what I would encourage people to look at is Marshall is suggesting that these leaders, community organizers that we're talking about, they need to have 5 specific kind of set of skills focused on relationship building, storytelling, strategizing, taking action, and structuring. So we'll not cover all, but what I love a lot and what is very challenging in Armenian context, one is the storytelling. It's very difficult in Armenian culture to ask leaders to share their personal stories. And what Marshall is asking, in order to build a relationship with others, you need to be vulnerable. You need to open up, share your kind of experiences, why you decided to do this, why you. Because this is a very legitimate question. Everybody is suffering. Why, especially you, became the person who is taking the step? So I think people think that kind of people are rational. If we explain the issue, they will trust us that we know the issue. But it doesn't work like that. Relations are more like built on emotional level. So Marshall is suggesting to start telling your story of self. Why did you care? What made you care about it? And what made you actually believe in yourself that you can do something about it? And why do you think that we should care? So this storytelling approach is very important in order to build trust, especially in context where there's a lot of disinformation about civil society and the motivation of civil society actors. So, the other is about structuring. There is a Snowflake model that Marshall suggests to think about how to build your organization, because when you're building a lot of relationships in your community organized work, it cannot be just like left without structure. There needs to be a purposeful structure. And there are different ways to go about it. Like usually you can think very like centralized or decentralized approaches to structuring the organization. What Marshall is suggesting is basically known in the kind of in this work as a more distributed structure, where you have the core leadership, but you also have interconnected teams that kind of grow out of this core leadership team, and they kind of create a shape of a snowflake. And it has a growth potential, I don't know, unlimited growth potential, because each team can then bring new people in. But also they are not only kind of distributing the roles and responsibilities, they are also distributing accountability. So in this way, you don't have the core team making decisions and then being accountable. You have each team taking responsibility and then being accountable to each other on the things that they kind of committed to. So the Snowflake model is something that I'm kind of really kind of visually also fascinating, and it shows the potential that we in the civil society have and we underestimate. We say we, I don't know, put up a call for application for a workshop and 20 people participated. It's not enough. Let's do one more. Let's do one more. But we don't realize that the 20 people that participated, they have a potential to bring, I don't know, 2, 3, at least people more, and then more, and then more, and then more. There is an imminent kind of potential of growth. And you can structure it in a way that it's not just like out of control, but people have specific roles and responsibilities, and they feel they are part of something that it's they can kind of have influence on. It's not formalistic. They have clear roles, and they are accountable to each other. So yeah, these are my two favorite kind of method things that I like from Marshall's theory.
You also worked with Armenian organizations on a narrative change. So which narratives we need to change, and what are the new narratives we need to adopt, and why?
I think narrative change is also, so in Marshall's work, the narrative change is part of the storytelling. What is the narrative that we talk, that we share about us, who we are as a people? What is the problem? What is the solution we want? And what I care more about the narratives that we have in Armenia around civil society, because civil society, because of a bunch of like objective and subjective reasons, it's been very misunderstood. They kind of there are a lot of fake kind of narratives around civil society, and what I really hope that kind of we can work to change that. And there are certain things that I especially want to change. In terms of narratives, we talk more, as I said, about issues. We don't talk about values that unite us. We are very issue-centric, issue-focused, and we don't realize that the importance of the specific problem that we want to address might change from person to person depending on their values. So if you value freedom more than security, you look at the data protection differently than the person who values security more than freedom. So we need to talk more about values that we want to see more in the society, and we need to talk more about what are the values that the civil society stands for. Because when we talk about issues, we talk about what we are against. When we talk about values, we talk more about what we are for, what we are fighting for. And this, I believe, has a more uniting power than just being against something. The other thing is that we need a very compelling narrative of the, like a vision for the future. So if we have more of these values, what is the future? What would the future look like? Unfortunately, we're stuck in the past and the present as a civil society because, again, we are very reactive. And unlike the political, especially the populist forces, we're not able to offer a very compelling vision of a good life that we are fighting for. This is what where we will get to if we fight for these values. And if people cannot visualize this future, they will not join you. They will not kind of support you. So the civil society, I believe, needs to have this kind of very visual, compelling vision of the good life that we are fighting for. And then the last thing is not just about narrative, because sometimes I hear a lot of organizations say we need to improve our communication, tell better stories, etc. It's not going to help if you are not also practicing the narrative that you preach. So, for example, if you are trying to shift the narrative that the civil society is not some elitist, detached group, but the civil society is one of you, people need to see it in practice. I mean, if, again, coming to elections, if there are certain people who are being forced by their employers, like big companies, to vote certain way. If they don't see you there, if they don't know that they can apply to you and you will protect them, if they don't see it on the ground, however, I don't know, good messaging and nice framing and memes, whatever you want to use, it's not going to change their perspective. So narrative needs to be kind of also practiced. You need to be the narrative. If you say the environmental activists are not some destructive force against the economy, you need to show that you are not only fighting against a mining project, you are also showing an alternative. This is what we need more. So this is what development should look like. So there is a trap that people believe good communication will solve everything. I see this a lot. People invest a lot of money in capacity, in strategic communication, narrative change, etc. But if on the ground you do not actually reflect this narrative in your practices, it will not work. So for the civil society, this is what we need more, because we tried to do a campaign a couple of years ago. It was called Civil Society for You. We needed to show that people, these organizations are there for you. But some of the organizations that were part of the campaign were not really for you. So they started thinking about that. It's good, but this is, I think, the most important change in terms of narrative that needs to happen.
We have now talked about these, interesting, exciting in many ways concepts, but now the question comes, you have tried to adapt these organizing-based approaches to the Armenian context. And let's start with the Restart Next Generation Leadership Academy. What are your experience? How you try to bring these approaches, and what has been the results?
Yeah, I think we saw the gap We saw that most of the leadership development or civic education programs in Armenia are missing this community organizing approach, and we tried to focus on a couple of things, basically. One was more about political education, because especially with youth, we needed to give them space to reflect on their reality. Because as I said, the first question you ask, who are you and who are your people? It's very difficult for a young person to answer this question like at a young age, because it's in a, it's very fluid. I don't know who am I right now. I'm someone, and then I don't know, someone else. So the first thing we wanted to give them is a space to reflect who are their people, and it was a very challenging part of the work, because some would identify as students, but some would say, I'm student a couple of more years, and then I'm not a student. Who am I? So this is the first part that we tried to do. And then the other was to focus on these leadership skills that I mentioned, the relationship building, storytelling. And what we tried to do is to do more on in practice. So it's not that you go and do a project after the academy, but you come to the academy. It's a very long-term, by the way, academy. It's lasts 4 or 5 months, very unusual. But throughout these 4 or 5 months, you have the space, you have the mentors, you have the support system for you to go out in your community and start to talk to people, to identify what they care about, to think about what is the change that you want to achieve, and then slowly build your kind of campaign. And the work that the actual action that they did was actual campaigns, not short-term projects. And what we measured the success by was, on the first level, the amount of relationship that they managed to build on the ground in their communities, and then the campaigns that they collectively started doing. And we see there were very successful examples where kind of the organizing process resulted in a very long-term kind of activities in the community. They started with one issue, then moved to another, but the community was already organized. They were able to decide themselves. This was the major success. It was not like it's the minority of the cases. This was not the, not everyone was able to do that. And kind of, I think that's okay. But what we also noticed, especially in times of these more challenging situations like elections and disinformation and the attacks on democracy, the networks that was created by this academy, even if people didn't do very successful campaigns, but they still had these connections with each other. They knew that they had certain shared values, ideals. They've had very shared experiences, doing a camp together, staying out late, I don't know, doing some fun activities. So this connection created ground for more collective action when needed. So right now, the majority of the network is involved in doing a media campaign around elections, talking about harmful narrative, disinformation, voter education, a lot of stuff. So they are there when needed, even when they don't have actual organizations or actual campaigns on the ground, they still have these connections with each other. So that the other thing that we prioritize, it shouldn't be just an educational program. It should lead into a growing network where people are connected. And it's very hard to maintain this connection as the network grows. We try to organize a couple of public events, festivals, going to villages, doing some volunteering stuff, all of that, just to keep these connections in place. But in this more digital age for young people, it's really difficult to kind of also maintain this connection. Yeah, I think maybe this much about how we try to approach with the next gen. Yeah.
And when we start something, we usually at the beginning have some ideas what we want, but then during the implementing that idea, we in one moment realize that for whatever reason it doesn't work in our specific context. So whether there has been some things what you kind of pick up from the organizing methodology, and then you just have seen that you need to do it differently in Armenian society.
Yeah, work in progress, by the way. Not everything is, even the challenges that we've identified, we're still trying to new things. So one is there is a real competition with other programs like youth development, civic education, youth leadership programs. That's not in the benefit of us because these programs, they offer status, they offer career development opportunities, they offer grants, they offer some, perspective of well-being. I don't know. We don't do that. We're trying to focus more on like community identity, belonging. This is what we offer. But for a lot of young people, especially in Armenia, for example, the majority of students are working. They have to work. So for them, it's very important to have, some financial sustainability and all of that. And it's very difficult to compete with these kind of programs that actually offer that. The other thing is that I mentioned the grants. Unfortunately, this has ruined the idea of civic participation in youth because like hundreds of youth civic education programs end with giving them a small amount of grant to do something. And this has become kind of the norm, the expectation. And when we talk about community organizing, I mentioned the resources are within the community. The resources are not out there with the donor. And it's very difficult to challenge that. The most successful cases we had was where people started doing something within their community, with their own resources. And then they realize when they do that, they also get the donor's attention. And then donors start giving them grants. So we try to use these successful cases to show that you are more you are more likely to get a funding from a donor if you start something already with your resources, because you will show your commitment, your capacities, etc. But it's very difficult because this project-based thinking is very, very
deeply rooted in a sector. Yeah. And strongly, basically, almost put on a steroids in a short period of the times when there is a lot of funding, donor funding around. And when the donor funding disappears, we had a trouble, yes. Isn't it? But when there is a lot of donor funding, let's say, then basically it starts to spread almost like a cancer.
And maybe one more thing that I think is difficult in use, but we found it elsewhere. I mentioned this fluid identity because youth are not they don't feel that they need to stick to a certain identity. They don't need to stick to a certain people. So when we start by asking them, who are your people? It's very difficult to build on that. So that's why in our context with youth, we try to be more flexible. We allowed to also maybe start, okay, let's start with an issue. If you care about, a certain issue, but let's do some reflection on why this issue matters to you. Why is it you that cares about it? Why is it your issue? Because sometimes you would see young people who say, it would be good to solve this problem. But when we ask them, if this problem isn't solved, would it bother you that much? The answer is usually no. So we try to get to the issue that they really care about. Even if they don't know who their people are, we try to do this reflection on, why is this issue important, especially specifically to them.
So you have also explored how to introduce the organizing approaches into the environmental activism in Armenia, and whether you had some slightly different experience there.
Yeah, this is where the main change comes. With environmental activists or people who are conscious about environmental issues, we've had groups of people I don't know, aged 16 to 65. And they managed to have like find common language because for them, their identity is very clear that they care about the environment. So you can be a teacher, I don't know, you can be a student, you can be a farmer, whatever. For them, there is a shared value that already unites them, and it makes it easier to kind of create this belonging in the community. So this is the first thing that I immediately noticed that is easier to do. And then what's different also with the environmental community organizing is that a lot of issues that people notice in their communities and they realize that the solution is at the national level, they cannot solve it in their community, in their like village or town. It's easier to connect different people in different parts of Armenia who share the same problem of river pollution and say, let's do a joint campaign, an advocacy campaign that will be a distributed kind of way of campaign where you do an action in your community, you do in your community, but all of us are targeting the government to do something. So these joint actions are easier to do because people realize that they have the same problem and the solution is at the government. And then I think for environmental activism, the entry point is very clear. If someone is very caring about environmental issues, you can already start build on that to talk more about systemic problems. So they can start and talking to you about like, I don't know, river pollution, but then you will ask about, it's easy to go from there about economy, about politics, about, more systemic issues. But when you talk with youth, their experience with issues is not that deep yet, mostly, and their willingness to think more like broadly, systemically, is not there yet, and it's also okay. So while youth is motivated with more short-term changes that will improve their life immediately, with environmental activism, it is possible to go deeper and identify the deeper layers of power that influence these issues and start thinking more like years ahead, what kind of economy do we want? Because this is not something that you do in a project, right? So.
You and I have already talked about the following question a couple of times, so I'm not sure that we have found the response, but let me come back to that. And that is the question, how to apply organizing approaches to the important social economic groups. We can call them, or during the COVID, we call them indispensable professions on whom the daily functioning of the society depends, like teachers, healthcare workers, transport workers. And it is very hard for us in a civil or traditional civil society to find the entry points to these important social economic groups. And why it is so hard for us? We don't really have trade unions in our society, so there is a huge gap there. But we as a civil society somehow don't find a way how to work with these groups, organize these groups, and then make them powerful agents of the change.
It's been a challenge for us as well. We've tried several times to reach out to teachers, healthcare workers, workers in certain industries like service or whatever. What I noticed is that these people are usually under a lot of administrative pressure. Unlike youth and environmental activists who can go outside of the system to talk to each other and plan something, usually it's very difficult for a teacher to find the space to safely organize themselves, right? So they are constantly under pressure. In Armenian context, these institutions have also been a lot like politicized. So especially before the revolution, the ruling party was kind of forcing them to collect votes for the election, and they were kind of abusing their vulnerability, and it's still the case. So they're very vulnerable to pressure from their employers and kind of also the administrative power. The other thing is that the question for us should be, what is our approach to organizing? Do we need to have the organizers from within the community, or can it be someone from the outside? So this is a debate. I'm not sure what's the right answer. I believe that the person should be from within. I don't believe that kind of an outsider can go and organize the community. But sometimes it might work. I don't know. Sometimes an outsider might be even more, people might be more open to listen or trust to an outsider because there is a very low level of trust within the group, inside. So maybe you need someone from the outside to come and kind of agitate and organize these people. If we go to the direction of if it needs to be someone from the inside, I think I've been thinking how we can do that, because I know organizations in Armenia that, for example, organize some trainings for teachers or like more professional development or for healthcare workers. So what I see, unfortunately, we're not using these moments when we can get them out and do a training on their professional development. We need to look at these people, talk to these people, and identify the ones who are capable of kind of starting some processes within the community, who have the leadership potential, basically. Where unfortunately the organizations that do this training, they don't look at them, they look at them as training beneficiaries. They don't look at them as potential leaders. So what we need to do maybe is to introduce these approaches to this professional development organization, to have someone within the organization who is just attending the training with them and talking to these teachers and maybe seeing that there is someone who complains a lot. I don't know. And let's invite them for a coffee and start talking. Okay, and it shouldn't be very, the entry point should be very easy. You shouldn't ask them to become a community organizer immediately. You can ask them, maybe let's organize a movie screening with your teachers, but you will organize that. You will ask them to do that. So I think the service organizations and this capacity development organization, they are completely detached from community organizing. But if we integrate this, so we combine the service provision and community organizing, I believe there is a huge potential. Because I've seen it in Armenia in the case of domestic violence survivors. So we have some organizations that provide services like shelter, I don't know, psychological and other support. And because these organizations also had this activist mindset, they've also identified among the victims of domestic violence who are the people who, if given certain support, can start to speak up and can start to talk to other women and try to organize them. So I would suggest thinking more in this direction, how we combine the service provision with community organizing and gradually kind of identify new people and slowly give them opportunities to take on more leadership roles.
Let me come to one topic related to the very important, as you already mentioned, elections happening in 10 days in Armenia. And that is the question about the youth political attitudes in this moment, because according to the surveys, the youth in Armenia is currently the biggest single social group that is skeptical or reserved toward Nicol government, although at the same time they definitely will not giving support to the pro-Russian parties, but they are remaining undecided, skeptical, critical. And that is a little bit surprising for anybody from outside, that you see the people in the rural areas having, if you want, kind of more pro-democracy choices. So you have worked a lot with the youth. Do you have some explanation? What is the reason, or what might be the reason?
It's tough to say very convincingly, but I can think about a couple of things. One is that it's not that straightforward. If you look at this survey, there is another question that kind of shows a different picture. The question is, do you believe the country is going in the right direction? And here you see a lot of youth would say yes. the country is going to the right direction. So the problem is not that they are not confident in democracy, or I don't know, more I don't know, they don't want more Western alignment, or I don't know. It's not that. It's more I think it's the anxiety that they feel, because youth is constantly bombarded by a lot of kind of fear-based, anxiety-inducing narratives that the weight of the kind of the future of this country is on your shoulders. That these elections are going to determine what's going to happen next, and the narratives are very fear-based, and I think youth is under a lot of anxiety. And while they, according to surveys, more of them believe that the country is going to the right direction, they are not sure. They are uncertain. What is the wrong thing that is happening? And in that sense, I think if you also add the trauma that young people especially have after the war, who kind of and then some certain of disillusionment with the revolution and post-revolutionary development, I would say they are feeling anxious and uncertain rather than they are more skeptical or something. So, and this is for us to think about how we give them the sense of certainty, how we kind of give them a sense of purpose and, I don't know, direction. And unfortunately, it cannot be done in just 1 or 2 months, as many donors expect with the funding before election. But yeah, it's more long-term work.
And the last question is the main topic of our panel at Unlock is how to build a stronger foundation for the civic action and mass mobilization. And do you have some preliminary thoughts before we discuss that in Prague, how that can be done in a strategic and sustainable way?
Yeah, I've tried to narrow it down to, I think, like 4 or 5 things, but let me see how this goes. So one thing that we've, I think, covered a bit is the very anti-political nature of civil society is harmful when kind of civil society organizations are not thinking about systemic change. They are not thinking about how to build power to make this change happen. So, and it's a very common phrase in Armenia, we're not political, but you're confusing it with being partisan. And it's not the same. I think civil society needs to be comfortable, with its political nature, because the changes that we want are political, and the only way to have political change, political influence, is you can compete with political parties in the sense of the power. You can compete with businesses in the sense of the power you have. So one way I kind of more of a mindset shift to consider that we are political and we are contesting power. And this would also allow the possibility that it's okay if certain organizations in the civil society think about actually entering the politics at a certain point. Because if they are challenging power, it means one of the ways of challenging power would mean to go into election. So I think this is one thing that I would like us to explore more, how we can kind of navigate these boundaries of partisan, political, and civic. The second is I am, based on the tradition of community organizing, I believe that for more sustainable approaches to civic participation, we need to encourage more membership-based organizations, because this gives more credibility and legitimacy to the organization. It gives more organizing power. It gives more diversity of resources that can be used. And also it creates accountability mechanisms, because I think in membership-based organizations like trade unions or like faith organizations, I know not very strong in our region, but this culture is especially prominent in these groups. Accountability is very strong because people have the sense of ownership. They participate in decision making and they are accountable to each other. They kind of find the resources within the community. So it changes the whole approach, and it also looks more. It also thinks more long term and more strategic rather than project by project, because you are a group of people with a shared, I don't know, identity, values, and interests. So this is something that will never go away. It means you will constantly think about how to be there, how to challenge power, how to keep people in power accountable, and how to kind of achieve long-lasting change. If your funding cuts, it doesn't mean you will stop. So this would be more kind of membership-based, member-driven type of organization that I think we need more. The third thing, I think we talked about the vision and narrative. Organizing should be done along with having a compelling vision of the future, of the good life. We talk a lot about democracy, human rights, etc., but we need to connect it with the good life. This is what your life, how your life will change. And I think that's one of the failures in Armenia that we had after the revolution. We couldn't show people that having democracy means this is how it connects to your everyday life. This is how it's going to help you live better. And there needs to be more powerful narratives about the democracy in practice. We talk a lot about threat and the crisis and the problem. We don't show enough how we were successful when we joined together and we managed to change something. The emotions of joy, happiness, I don't know, excitement, these are not, unfortunately, these are not present in the civil society. And if we want people to join the civil society movement, they need to feel better about themselves to join the cause. And if you are always presenting as people who are vulnerable, who are being attacked, this is one thing that I heard in Armenia when civil society organizations put up statements saying we are being attacked, nobody's helping us, nobody's supporting us, and kind of claiming this role of the victim. Nobody is going to join you if you're the victim. So we need to show the real and very kind of inspiring examples of people power in action. And lastly, again, maybe based on the lessons learned from the Armenian post-revolutionary civil society challenges, is to build long-term infrastructure for resilience. And I think we got too confident after the revolution that everything would go well, and we have our people in the government, and we didn't plan for any crisis that might happen later. And for that, we need to have the infrastructure that is continuously practicing the democracy muscle, regardless of the external, threats. You continuously practice it. You have like community hubs, learning centers. You have, people in arts and culture, in pop culture, constantly doing their thing, talking about democracy, fighting for specific local changes. But you need to build it as an infrastructure. It needs to be interconnected so that it can be kind of mobilized when it's needed for more kind of collective response. And this infrastructure-based kind of thinking or ecosystem-based thinking is something that I'm also thinking a lot about, because we've been looking at civil society and we've only thinking about NGOs. But it's not, it's just one part of the professional NGOs. We need them. As much as I kind of criticize them, we need them. But we need a lot more as part of this infrastructure. We need researchers, we need, songwriters, screenwriters, whatever. We need teachers, we need people who actually create alternatives, who show how, different type of economy can be practiced. So this infrastructure mindset is also something that I think the donors need to take, because one of the reasons that community organizing is not possible in our context, I believe, is that donors are also thinking very short term. And so, for example, you cannot, the donor is asking you to give a very short, in a very short term period, to give you an impact. This is what we achieve. And I don't know if there are many donors who would accept a report where you just write, in the last 10 months, I've only gone and talked to people and listened to them and build relationships. Give me more money so that I can do that more. But if you look at this relationship building as part of the infrastructure, this needs also a lot of funding. And unfortunately, I think this kind of perception is also missing among the donors who support this, right?
Hayk, thanks a lot. I really think we have touched a number of the very, very kind of interesting and useful ideas. Looking forward to welcome you here in Prague and the Unlock, and looking forward, let's say, that we discuss it with many, many other friends in a real life, not just online.
Yeah, thanks, Igor.